Hello and welcome to cooking segment about making soaked buttermilk bread. This recipe has been adapted from my sister-in-law Joanne and springboarding from Nourishing Traditions and some other places. But the main gist is that wheat is hard to digest, hard on the body to digest, and so it sits overnight and soaks in a buttermilk and butter combination in which it gets partially digested by the enzymes that are in buttermilk, and that way it's easier for the body to digest. So the first step in soaked buttermilk bread is putting 8 cups of flour in this bowl. So here we go. I've had the luxury of being capable of grinding my own flour. So I keep it in the freezer, I grind it, and then I keep it in the freezer. And I get my wheat berries from a place called Wheat Montana, and they say they don't have GMOs in their wheat, which is really good. That's the way I like to feed my children. And so I use part hard red wheat, which is this, and then I use part soft white wheat, which is what is used for pies and crusts and other things, but it just gives the bread a softer texture. Here's cup 6. I have 4 white and 6, 7, and 8 cups of hard red wheat. So there's the wheat we add to the bowl, and next we are going to add 1 cup of buttermilk, which I have right here from the store. I don't make my own buttermilk, so I have 1 cup of buttermilk that I'm going to add to this bowl, and 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 cups of warm water, depending on how hydrated the mixture gets. But right now I'm going to melt a 1/2 cup of butter with a 1/2 cup of honey. You have your bread for the entire week, and you don't have to worry with having store-bought bread or running out of bread. Here's the 1 cup of buttermilk going over the flour. And then we have the 1.5 cups to 1.25 cups of warm water, depending on how much we need to completely soak this. So you just mix this in until all of the flour is moistened, and try to make sure that all parts are equally moistened, and I just like to knead it. And then if there's part of it that seems like it's not getting in the mix, then just add the rest of the water. Looks like I'm going to have to do that. So that is done. I'm going to get my honey and butter. And that is done as well. So we have that. Now we mix it more. We mix that honey and butter in. And then it soaks overnight. So I usually put a cloth over top of it just so nothing gets in and let it sit for about 12 hours. Could be a little less, it just depends on when you have time to make it. And once it's soaked overnight, I will show you what to do with it. You might want to add the honey and butter at the exact same time as the buttermilk and water. That way everything's mixed consistently. I actually just forgot to grab it off the stove, which is why everything's now mixed consistently. Everything's wet and it's a nice dough to sit overnight. And the buttermilk should do the trick. So I added a little bit more flour because I had added all the water. I should have added the honey and the butter at the same time as I added the buttermilk and the water. That way I wouldn't have added the rest of the water. But this is what you want the dough to look like. When you're done, you should be able to pick it up. It should be a nice, flexible ball, not a gooey mess. And that is how it should soak overnight in a nice, flexible ball. It's early in the morning, and little bodies may be getting up, but I wanted to show you the next step on this. I have a half cup warm water here, and you want to take your food thermometer and you want to measure the temperature, and you want to make sure that your temperature is between 95 and 110. Because too hot and the yeast will die, but too cold the yeast won't activate. So you have a half a cup of warm water, and then you get 2 tablespoons of honey, and you mix it in with the warm water. There's 1. There's 2. So you mix that in together, and then you take the yeast. Once you're for sure the temperature is correct, you take the yeast and you put in 2 packages of yeast, or if you go by the tablespoon, it's 2 tablespoons of yeast. And then you mix the yeast into this honey and water, and you want to let it stand for 5 minutes so that it can get nice and bubbly on the top and you can see that it's active and working. So I'm going to put the yeast in here, and then I'm going to let it stand here for 5 minutes, and then I'll be back to do the next step. I did want to tell you, as I add this yeast, I use active dry yeast. There are all different kinds of yeast, but I get good results with active dry yeast. So I'm going to pour the yeast in and mix it in, and then it's going to sit here for 5 minutes, and I'll show you what the bubbling looks like that you want to look for. Okay, it's bubbly now. If you want to see this, it's actually rising up to fill the cup even more. But there are, let's see how long you can do that. There are bubbles that are popping along the surface, and it's expanding and filling the cup. So I don't know that you can see it terribly well, but that is what it looks like when it's bubbly. And you just look for the bubbles popping along the top, and then it's getting bigger. And then you're going to add 1 teaspoon baking soda and 1 or 2 teaspoons salt. So 1 teaspoon baking soda, and then 2 teaspoons of salt. And you're going to mix that together with the yeast, and then you're going to pour it over top of your flour, and then the fun part of kneading will begin. And you can use a KitchenAid mixer with the dough hook, or you can knead it by hand. That's up to you, whatever works best for you. I like to knead by hand, I think it's fun. But you'll mix this all together and just make sure that the yeast gets into every part. You'll remember I added a little more flour to my mixture yesterday just so it was the right shape and it was holding together. And you just want to make sure before you soak it that it's a nice firm ball like that, that it's flexible and it's not just a gooey mess like mine was when I started to soak it, because I forgot to put the butter and the honey in with it when I was pouring the water in. So you knead this together until the honey or until the yeast mixture is incorporated in the dough, and then I will show you what to do next.